What happens when a man known for charm, humor, and effortless likability suddenly stops smiling and decides he's had enough? The studio lights of the view blaze down like a spotlight on a stage where everything is supposed to feel safe, predictable, controlled. The audience settles into their seats, murmuring with anticipation, unaware that what they're about to witness will ripple far beyond this room. Cameras glide into position. Producers whisper into headsets. And at the center of it all sits Paul Rudd, relaxed, composed, offering that familiar, easy grin that has disarmed millions over the years. But today, something is different. Before we dive in, if you love moments like this, raw, unexpected, and unforgettable, make sure to subscribe to Stage View, hit that like button, and drop a comment below. Because stories like this, they don't come around often. The segment begins the way it always does. Light laughter, casual banter, a playful introduction. Sunny Hostin leans forward slightly, her tone poised, her smile professional but measured. She's done this 1,000 times. She knows how to guide a conversation, how to press when needed, how to extract something real from even the most media-trained guest. "Paul," she begins, her voice smooth but edged with curiosity. "People love you for being, well, the nicest guy in Hollywood. But some critics say that staying neutral, staying nice, means avoiding real conversations. What do you say to that?" The audience chuckles softly. It feels like a harmless question, one of those gentle prods that invites a witty response. And for a split second, Paul plays along. His smile widens. He leans back slightly in his chair. But then he pauses. It's subtle, almost invisible, but the energy shifts. His eyes don't dart playfully like they usually do. They don't search for a punchline. Instead, they settle, focused, steady, grounded in something deeper. "Well," he says slowly, "I think there's a difference between being nice and being silent." The audience quiets. The kind of quiet that creeps in when something unexpected brushes against the surface. Sunny tilts her head, intrigued. "And which one do you think you've been?" There's a beat. A long one. Paul exhales softly, his fingers interlocking in his lap. "If I'm being honest, probably silent." A ripple moves through the room. Not loud, not dramatic, but noticeable. The hosts exchange glances. This wasn't the direction they expected. Sunny leans in, sensing something. "So why now?" she asks. "Why speak up now?" And that's when it happens. Paul Rudd, America's eternal nice guy, leans forward. His posture changes. His voice loses that light, comedic rhythm and takes on something firmer. Something grounded. "Because," he says, his tone calm but unmistakably serious, "it gets exhausting watching conversations happen around you, and realizing that staying quiet doesn't actually keep the peace. It just avoids it." The audience shifts in their seats. You can feel the tension building, not explosive, not chaotic, but tight like a string being pulled just a little too far. Sunny's expression sharpens slightly. "Are you saying people here avoid real conversations?" There it is. The question lands like a spark in dry air. Paul doesn't flinch. "I'm saying," he replies carefully, "that sometimes discussions become more about winning a moment than understanding it." A murmur spreads through the audience. Some nod. Others lean forward, eyes widening. This isn't promotion. This isn't a light interview anymore. Sunny's smile tightens, not disappearing, but shifting. "That's a strong statement," she says. "Are you directing that at anyone specifically?" The room feels smaller now. The light's hotter. Paul hesitates, but only for a second. "I think," he says, choosing his words with precision, "when conversations turn into debates where people are more focused on being right than being honest, it shuts people down, including guests." The implication hangs in the air. Not shouted, not aggressive, but unmistakable. For the first time, Sunny leans back slightly. Not retreating, recalibrating. "So you felt shut down here?" she asks, her voice measured, but with an undercurrent now. Paul shakes his head gently. "Not today," he says. "But I've watched it happen. And I've felt it before in rooms like this." The audience reacts more audibly now. A few gasps. A scattered clap that quickly dies down, unsure whether it should exist. The other hosts glance between them, sensing the shift from conversation to confrontation. Sunny crosses her hands on the table, her gaze steady. "You know, Paul, this show is about tough conversations. It's about asking hard questions. That's not shutting people down, that's engaging." Paul nods slowly. "I agree," he says. "But there's a line between asking hard questions and deciding the answer before the other person speaks." Silence. Heavy. Immediate. Unavoidable. Sunny's expression flickers, just for a moment. Not anger. Not shock. Something more complex. Recognition, maybe. Or resistance. You think I do that? She asks. And suddenly, this isn't about Hollywood anymore. This isn't about promotion or reputation or even the audience. This is personal. Paul doesn't rush his answer. He lets the silence breathe, lets the weight of the question settle before responding. I think, he says finally, his voice softer now but no less firm, that everyone does it sometimes. Me included. But when it happens on a platform this big, it matters more. The audience is completely still now. No laughter. No murmurs. Just attention, undivided and intense. Sunny exhales through her nose, her posture straightening. So what would you have us do differently? It's not defensive. Not entirely. But it's not neutral either. Paul leans back slightly, the tension in his shoulders easing just a fraction. Listen, he says simply. Not to respond, but to actually hear what's being said. There's something disarming about the way he says it. No accusation. No raised voice. Just clarity. And somehow, that makes it hit harder. Sunny studies him for a moment. The cameras capture every micro-expression, every flicker of thought passing behind her eyes. She's not backing down, but she's thinking. That's fair, she admits, though her tone still carries weight. But listening goes both ways. Paul nods immediately. It does. For a brief moment, it feels like the tension might dissolve, that the conversation might find its way back to safer ground. But then Sunny adds, so let me ask you this, are you ready to be challenged the same way you're challenging us right now? And just like that, the air tightens again. Paul smiles. But this time it's different. Not the easy, charming grin the world knows. Not the playful smirk that signals a joke is coming. This smile is quieter. More deliberate. Yeah, he says. I think I am. The audience leans forward as one. The hosts exchange glances again. The producers behind the cameras freeze, sensing something they can't control anymore. Because this isn't just an interview. It's a moment. And it's only just beginning. The moment hangs there, fragile, electric, like the air before a storm finally breaks. Paul's answer doesn't just sit in the room, it lingers. It presses against the walls of the studio, seeps into the silence, settles into every pair of eyes watching from the audience and beyond the cameras. And for the first time since the segment began, the view doesn't feel like a talk show. It feels like a stage where something real is about to unfold. Sunny doesn't rush in. That's the first sign this has shifted. Normally, the rhythm is quick, question, answer, follow-up, pivot. But now she pauses, studying him, weighing something internally. All right, she says finally, her voice controlled but sharper than before. Then let's talk honestly. A subtle reaction ripples through the audience. This is no longer casual conversation. This is a line being drawn. She leans forward, her hands clasped together on the table. You say conversations can feel predetermined, she continues. But from where I sit, Paul, guests often come in with carefully crafted narratives. PR-approved answers. Safe positions. Isn't that also avoiding honesty? A few murmurs of agreement float from the audience. Paul nods slowly, almost as if he expected this. Yeah, he says. It can be. Sunny lifts a brow. So how are you different right now? There's no hostility in her tone, but there's pressure. Intentional pressure. Paul lets out a small breath, glancing down for a moment before looking back up. I don't know that I am different, he admits. I think I've probably done exactly that more times than I'd like to admit. That answer lands softer, but deeper. The honesty disarms the room for a second. It's not deflection. It's not polished. It's vulnerable. Sunny's posture shifts, just slightly. Not relaxed, but less rigid. Then why call it out here? She asks. Why now, on this platform? Paul's jaw tightens just a bit, not in anger, but in thought. Because this platform matters, he says. People watch this show and form opinions, not just about guests, but about the conversations themselves. And when those conversations feel one-sided, it doesn't just affect the person sitting here. It affects everyone watching. The audience is listening differently now. Not waiting for a punchline. Not expecting entertainment. They're absorbing. Sunny taps her fingers lightly against the table. A small gesture, but one that betrays the gears turning beneath her composed exterior. One-sided, she repeats. That's a strong claim. It's an honest one, Paul replies. There's a flicker of tension again, quieter this time, but more focused. Sunny tilts her head. Give me an example. And there it is. The kind of request that turns abstract criticism into something concrete. Something harder to walk back. The other hosts glance at Paul, then at Sunny. The audience leans in, anticipation building like a slow crescendo. Paul hesitates, not out of fear, but out of care. You can see it in the way he presses his lips together, the way his eyes shift briefly, as if replaying moments in his head. I've seen interviews, he begins slowly, where the question isn't really a question. It's a statement with a question mark at the end. A few scattered laughs, nervous, uncertain. Sunny doesn't smile. Explain. It's when someone asks something, Paul continues, but the way it's framed already assumes the answer. So no matter what the guest says, they're already boxed in. The room is still again. Sunny leans back, crossing her arms now, not defensive, but grounded. You think I do that? Paul meets her gaze. I think it happens here sometimes, he says carefully. By me, she presses. The directness cuts through everything. Paul doesn't dodge it this time. Yeah, he says quietly. A sharp intake of breath from somewhere in the audience. The tension spikes, not explosive, but undeniable. This is no longer theoretical. It's personal, specific. Sunny's lips press together, her eyes narrowing just slightly, not in anger, but in focus. Then let's test that, she says. The energy shifts again, this time faster, more deliberate. I'm going to ask you something, she continues, leaning forward again, her voice steady but firm. And I want a real answer. Not a careful one. Not a safe one. A real one. Paul nods once. Okay. Do you think celebrities, people with influence like you, have a responsibility to speak out on political and social issues? Or is staying neutral a form of complicity? The question lands heavy. It's layered, loaded, impossible to answer without stepping into something deeper. The audience reacts instantly, some nodding, others shifting uncomfortably. Paul exhales slowly, running a hand across his chin. You can see the weight of it, not because he doesn't have an answer, but because he knows whatever he says will matter. I think, he begins, then pauses. Not to stall, but to choose. I think everyone has a responsibility to care, he says finally. But I don't think everyone has the same responsibility to speak in the same way. Sunny's eyes stay locked on him. That sounds like a careful answer. A ripple of tension again. Paul smiles faintly, not defensive, but aware. Maybe it is, he admits. But it's also true. Sunny doesn't let it go. Or maybe, she counters, it's a way of avoiding taking a clear stance. The words hang sharp in the air. Paul's smile fades, not dramatically, but enough to signal a shift. And maybe, he replies, his voice still calm but firmer now, it's a way of acknowledging that not every issue is as simple as picking a side and declaring it on television. The audience reacts louder this time, a mix of applause and murmurs. Sunny holds her ground, but silence can be interpreted as indifference. And speaking without understanding can be just as harmful. Paul shoots back. There it is, the first real clash. Not raised voices, not chaos, but conviction meeting conviction head on. The other hosts shift in their seats, the tension now impossible to ignore. One of them opens her mouth slightly, as if to interject, but stops. This moment isn't theirs to interrupt. Sunny leans in again, her voice lower now, more deliberate. So what you're saying is people should stay quiet unless they're completely informed. Paul shakes his head immediately. No, he says. I'm saying people should be willing to listen before they speak, and be okay with not having all the answers. And you think that's what's missing here? She asks. Paul pauses. This is the moment. The one where he could soften it. Redirect. Step back into safer territory. But he doesn't. Sometimes, he says. The word lands like a final note in a rising chord. Sunny leans back again, this time slower. Her expression is unreadable. Not closed off, not open. Processing. The audience is silent, hanging on every second. For a brief moment, neither of them speaks. And in that silence, something shifts again. Not escalation. Not resolution. Something deeper. Respect, maybe. Or at least recognition. Sunny breaks the silence first, her voice quieter now, but no less powerful. You know, she says, most people come on this show to promote something. A faint smile tugs at the corner of her lips. You came to challenge it. A soft murmur of agreement from the audience. Paul exhales, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. I didn't come here to fight, he says. I came here to talk. Sunny nods once. And we are talking. There's a beat. Then she adds, But conversations like this, they don't end in agreement. Paul nods. They don't have to. The audience applauds, tentatively at first, then stronger. But even as the applause builds, there's a feeling lingering beneath it. This isn't over. Not even close. Because the lines have been drawn. The truth has been spoken, at least in part. And something tells everyone watching. The next moment will go even further. The applause fades, but the energy doesn't. It lingers, thick and charged, like something unresolved pressing just beneath the surface. The kind of tension that doesn't explode, it tightens. Slowly, deliberately. The cameras are still rolling. The lights still burn. But now, every second feels heavier. Paul sits back, his posture more relaxed than before, but his eyes remain locked in. Focused. Present. He's not retreating. Not stepping away from what he started. And across from him, Sunny watches just as closely. There's a shift in her now. Not defensive. Not combative. Sharper. More intentional. You said something earlier, she begins, her voice calmer, but with an edge of precision now. About conversations becoming more about winning than understanding. Paul nods slightly. Yeah. She tilts her head. Let me ask you something honestly. Do you think that's what you're doing right now? The question lands differently than the others. It's not confrontational. It's reflective. And that makes it more dangerous. The audience leans in again, sensing the pivot. This isn't about proving a point anymore. This is about exposing one. Paul doesn't answer right away. For the first time since this began, he looks inward. His gaze drops briefly to the table. His fingers tap once, lightly, like he's grounding himself in the moment. The silence stretches, not awkward, but thoughtful. I don't think so, he says finally. But I can see how it might look that way. Sunny watches him closely. Then help me understand the difference. There's no trap in her tone now. No bait. Just clarity. Paul exhales slowly. Winning a conversation, he says, means you walk away feeling right. Understanding means you walk away, changed. Even a little. The audience reacts quietly. Soft murmurs, nods, the kind of response that isn't loud but carries weight. Sunny's expression softens just slightly. And you think that's happening here? Paul meets her gaze. I think it could. There's a pause. Then Sunny does something unexpected. She leans back, not to disengage, but to create space. Her arms uncross. Her posture opens just a fraction. Okay, she says. Then let's take this somewhere real. The words shift the room again. This isn't about theory anymore. This is about experience. You said you felt shut down before, she continues. Not necessarily here, but in rooms like this. What does that actually feel like? The question is quieter, but heavier than anything she's asked so far. Because now it's personal. Paul inhales, deeper this time. You can see it in his shoulders, the way they rise slightly before settling again. This isn't territory he's used to navigating publicly. Not like this. It feels like he starts, then stops. He searches for the right words, not the safest ones. The real ones. It feels like you're not there to be heard, he says finally. You're there to fill a role. The audience goes still again. Sunny doesn't interrupt. You're the guest, Paul continues, his voice steady but quieter now. The one with the story, the perspective, but also the one who can be challenged, redirected, reshaped to fit the moment. There's no accusation in his tone, just honesty. And sometimes, he adds, you can feel the direction it's going before you even open your mouth. A few people in the audience shift, exchanging glances. This is hitting something deeper than entertainment. Sunny leans forward again, but slower this time. Thoughtful. And that makes you what? She asks. Paul looks at her. Careful, he says. A single word. Simple. But it lands like something much bigger. Sunny nods once, absorbing it. And being careful, she says, means you're not being fully honest. Paul doesn't hesitate. Sometimes, yeah. The honesty is disarming again. There's no attempt to dodge. No effort to soften. Sunny studies him for a moment, then glances briefly toward the audience, almost as if acknowledging that they're part of this now too. You know, she says, from our side of the table, it can feel different. Paul tilts his head slightly. How so? She takes a breath, not dramatic, but deliberate. It can feel like guests come in already guarded, she explains, already prepared to protect their image. So when we push, it's not about winning. It's about getting past that wall. There's a quiet murmur of agreement. Paul nods slowly, considering it. That makes sense. But here's the challenge, Sunny continues. If we don't push, people say we're soft. If we do push, people say we're aggressive. So where's the balance? The question isn't rhetorical. It's real. And for the first time, the dynamic shifts completely. This isn't host versus guest anymore. It's two perspectives, meeting in the middle of something complicated. Paul leans back slightly, his expression thoughtful. I don't think there's a perfect balance, he admits. I think it's constantly shifting. Sunny watches him. That sounds like another careful answer. A faint smile returns to Paul's face, but this time it's warmer. Less guarded. Or maybe it's just an honest one, he says. A few soft laughs ripple through the audience, breaking the tension just enough to let the moment breathe. But Sunny isn't finished. Let me ask you something else, she says, her tone shifting again, firmer, more direct. Do you think shows like this do more good or more harm? The question lands heavier than anything before it. Because now, it's not just about conversation. It's about impact. The room tightens again. Paul doesn't answer immediately. His jaw sets slightly, not in resistance, but in focus. This is bigger than him now. Bigger than the moment. I think, he begins slowly, they do a lot of good. There's a subtle release of tension in the room. But he doesn't stop. And I think, he continues, they can do harm when the goal shifts from understanding to performance. The word hangs there. Performance. It echoes in the silence that follows. Sunny's eyes narrow just slightly, not offended but locked in. Performance, she repeats. Paul nods. Yeah, and you think that's what this is? She asks. There's no anger in her voice. Just a question that cuts straight to the center. Paul leans forward again. And this time, there's no hesitation. No, he says. The answer lands instantly. Clear. Direct. Unexpected. Sunny pauses, just for a fraction of a second, because that's not where she thought he'd go. This, Paul continues, gesturing lightly between them, this doesn't feel like performance. It feels real. The audience exhales, almost collectively. Something shifts again. Not tension. Release. Sunny's expression softens, not dramatically, but enough to be seen. Even when it's uncomfortable? She asks. Paul nods. Especially then. A quiet beat passes between them. Then something even more unexpected. Sunny smiles. Not the polished, on-camera smile. Something smaller. Realer. Well, she says, I'll give you this, you didn't come here to play it safe. A few laughs ripple through the audience again. Paul smiles back, a hint of his familiar charm returning, but grounded now, anchored in everything that's just happened. No, he admits. I didn't. The tension hasn't disappeared. But it's changed. Evolved. What started as a challenge has turned into something more layered, more human. But just as it feels like the conversation might finally settle, one of the other hosts leans forward, her voice cutting gently into the space. Can I jump in here for a second? All eyes shift. Because sometimes, the most unexpected turn comes from the voice you weren't watching. And just like that, the moment changes again. The shift is immediate. All eyes move, not to Paul, not to Sunny, but to the other end of the table. The voice that just entered the conversation doesn't carry the same intensity, but somehow, that makes it even more unpredictable. Because it's new, unscripted, unaligned. Can I jump in here for a second? There's a brief pause, one of those quiet, suspended moments where no one quite knows how this will land. Sunny turns her head slightly, giving a small nod. Go ahead. The camera angle widens just a touch, capturing the entire table now. The audience adjusts in their seats, curiosity replacing tension for now. The host leans forward, her expression thoughtful, her tone calm but deliberate. I've been listening to both of you, she says, glancing between Paul and Sunny. And it feels like we're circling around something bigger than just this show. Paul shifts slightly, attentive. Sunny's posture remains composed, but her gaze sharpens again, not defensive but focused. What do you mean? Sunny asks. The host exhales softly, choosing her words carefully. I mean, this isn't just about interviews or questions. It's about trust, between people talking and people watching. A quiet murmur spreads through the audience. Paul nods almost immediately. Yeah, he says. That's exactly it. Sunny tilts her head, her eyes narrowing slightly, not in disagreement, but in concentration. Trust goes both ways, she says. It does, Paul replies. And just like that, the conversation tightens again, but not in conflict. In clarity, the host continues, her voice steady. Viewers trust us to ask questions they might not get to ask themselves. But they also trust that what they're seeing is genuine. Not orchestrated. The word hangs there. Orchestrated. It lands differently than performance. Sharper. Colder. More deliberate. Sunny's expression flickers, just for a moment. Are you suggesting this is orchestrated? She asks. The host shakes her head quickly. No, I'm saying that's the perception people can have when conversations feel too controlled. Paul leans forward slightly, his interest clearly piqued. That's exactly what I was trying to get at, he says. Not that it is controlled, but that it can feel that way. Sunny's fingers tap lightly against the table again. A small gesture, but now it's familiar. A sign she's processing something deeper. And what would make it feel less like that? She asks. The question isn't sharp anymore. It's open. The host glances at Paul, almost inviting him to answer. He takes a breath. Uncertainty, he says. The answer catches the room off guard. Sunny's brow furrows slightly. Uncertainty. Paul nods. Yeah, letting a conversation go somewhere you didn't plan. Letting it be messy. Not knowing exactly how it's going to end. A few audience members nod, more visibly this time. Sunny leans back, considering it. That's a risk, she says. It is, Paul agrees. But it's also where the real stuff happens. The host smiles faintly, sensing the shift. That's what people connect to, she adds. Not perfection. Not control. Real moments. The audience responds with a soft wave of agreement. Murmurs, nods, a quiet kind of energy that builds rather than bursts. Sunny looks between them, her expression more introspective now than it's been at any point so far. You're both asking for something that sounds simple, she says. But in practice, it's complicated. Paul nods. Of course it is. So let me ask you this, she continues, her voice gaining a bit of its earlier firmness, not confrontational but grounded. If we let go of control, if we lean into uncertainty, what happens when a conversation goes wrong? The question lands with weight, because it's real, not theoretical. The room stills again. Paul doesn't answer right away. This time, the pause feels heavier, more deliberate, because there's no easy answer. There's always that risk, he admits. Things can be misunderstood. People can get hurt. Words can be taken out of context. Sunny nods slightly. Exactly. But avoiding that risk, Paul continues, his voice steady, doesn't eliminate the problem. It just hides it. The words settle deeply. Sunny's gaze stays locked on him. And you think bringing it into the open makes it better? I think it makes it honest, Paul says. There's a quiet intensity in the way he says it now. Less tension. More conviction. The host at the end of the table folds her hands together, watching the exchange carefully. Honesty isn't always comfortable, she says. No, Paul agrees. It's not. Sunny exhales slowly, her shoulders relaxing just a fraction. You keep coming back to that, she says. Honesty. Paul smiles faintly. Because it's the only thing that makes conversations matter. The audience reacts again, this time with a soft but growing applause. It builds slowly, not overwhelming the moment but supporting it. Sunny lets the applause pass before speaking again. And what about responsibility? She asks. Because honesty without responsibility can be dangerous too. Paul nods immediately. I agree. The quickness of his response catches her attention. I'm not saying people should just say whatever they feel without thinking, he continues. I'm saying they should be willing to mean what they say and stand by it. Sunny studies him for a moment, then glances briefly toward the audience, almost as if measuring the temperature of the room. And you're standing by everything you've said here today? She asks. The question is simple, but it carries everything with it. Paul doesn't hesitate. Yeah, he says. The answer lands clean. No qualifiers. No hesitation. Just certainty. The audience responds instantly, applause louder this time, more confident. But beneath the applause, there's something else. A shift. Not just in the conversation. In the room. Sunny leans back again, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then slowly she nods. All right, she says. 2 words. But they carry weight. Not agreement. Not defeat. Acknowledgement. The host beside her glances at the producers off camera, then back to the table. There's a subtle awareness now that this moment has gone far beyond what anyone expected. But it's not over. Not yet. Because Sunny leans forward one more time, her voice quieter now, but more precise than ever. Then let me ask you one final thing, she says. The audience quiets instantly. Paul's attention sharpens. Do you think, she continues, This conversation, right here, has changed anything? The question lingers in the air. Heavy, unavoidable. And for the first time since it all began, Paul doesn't answer right away. Because this time, the answer isn't just about him. It's about everyone watching. And whatever he says next won't just end the conversation. It will define it.